There's a lot of talk about some of these vaccine trials, some of the setback that we've seen because certain people have fallen ill. Is this a good or a bad thing?
Yeah, I think it is a good thing that we're seeing this process play out the way we want it to, the way it's written on paper that it should. I don't think we'd want to get to the end of this process and have a series of therapeutics and vaccines that have seen no adverse events, because it means our threshold for what those adverse events are is not strong enough. And so what we're seeing is the process that's in place playing out the way it should to ensure that when we get to the end, we know that we have a safe and effective product that we can distribute to Americans.
What is the communication needed around that? Or, you were talking to me also in the break, we're saying we've never really followed these trials so closely. Who's the best person to communicate this to the general public?
Yeah, I think that that's where a lot of the work has to happen. So the public is not used to, hearing all the ins and outs of this process and every single adverse event being reported in national news and making, primetime national news. And so ensuring that we're working with the community members who are going to be taking the vaccine, taking the vaccine or taking the products, and working with communication groups who really understand how you talk about risk, how you talk about the process, working with people who've spent their whole careers on the best messaging and the best communication strategies for this is absolutely critical.
Is the virus less deadly than it was 3-4 months ago?
I don't think I'm the right person to speak to that. I think that there's plenty of virologists who've been doing a lot of work on that piece. But what I will say is I think we're getting better at taking care of patients who've been infected with the virus. And so perhaps outcomes are looking better. I don't think we've seen a lot of mutation in this virus to warrant saying that it's different or less deadly. But we as a system, especially a healthcare system, have gotten better at ensuring that when people get infected with the virus, they get the best care. We have new strategies for their care. We have new therapeutics coming online and getting them out of the hospital and safely home.
Lauren, going back to the vaccine and, some of these trials being halted, is there a feeling that actually, political pressure is overwhelming some of the scientific rigor that is needed?
I think we were all feeling that way a few months ago and into last month. And the companies actually stepped up and said, we will not cut corners on the scientific rigor. I think there is a bit of worry that the emergency use authorization mechanism, which allows it to move products faster to the public, may have lowered the threshold for a company's ability to obtain that tool or obtain that classification, and that may reduce the likelihood of people enrolling in clinical trials for these very same therapeutics and vaccines. So I think that's the piece we really have to watch, making sure that we don't overuse the emergency use authorization mechanism and making sure that we can really complete all of these clinical trials that we're going through so that when we get to the other side, we have really strong therapeutics, we have really strong vaccines that the public is willing to take and use.
How much is being done to really understand, how we distribute the vaccine once we have the formula?
There's a lot of work in that space right now, and I think there's people who have spent their whole careers studying the most appropriate approach to this scarce resource allocation mechanism. So targeting frontline responders, targeting the most vulnerable of our populations. There's agencies who are really focused on this question. And I think we have to pay really close attention to it, because not only are we going to prioritize people who most need it, but these also might be the people who are most at risk, and some of them are absolutely critical to the response. So we don't want to put anyone at higher risk than they absolutely have to be, and we want to make sure that the vaccine strategies for distribution protect the most in the shortest amount of time.
What does Trump's illness actually, put the spotlight on? I know there was a lot of focus on some of the antibody drugs that he also touted as a great success. Is there going to be a lot more work done in that field?
I think there's been a lot of work done in the antibody field, and we'll continue to see the development of monoclonal antibodies for, myriad different diseases. I think it's great that it puts the spotlight on this type of therapeutic, but they're expensive and they're hard to produce and they're hard to distribute. So I think focusing on that element will be absolutely critical. I also think it highlights the disparate levels of care in America, and that'll be something that's really important to focus on. So he got every therapeutic that was available. He got medevac to Walter Reed. He got transported and cared by some of the top clinicians in the country, including one of our own. And it is fantastic to see that happen. But we also have people dying every day of this virus because they can't either access care or they have underlying medical conditions that limit their ability to recover from the virus. And so I think it really does highlight the disparate levels of care in America and the disparate levels of access to care.